What's up, guys? I'm Dr. Antonio with Loud Chiropractic and Coaching. We are based here out of Lafayette, Colorado, which is in Boulder County. Today, what we're going to be going over is a couple thoracic mobility drills that are kind of our bread and butter for getting people to loosen up their mid-backs. Whether you sit at a desk a lot, whether you're a parent and you're holding baby, nursing, feeding, changing, all these things where we're in a much more rounded back position, and or for just helping remove the stagnation from our life. Oftentimes posture gets demonized, but it's more a lack of movement that is the issue more than anything. Too much standing is not good, too much sitting is not good. Also, inactivity is also not good. So what you're gonna see is a series of just mobility drills that are specifically tailored for opening up your mid-back, which would be mid-scapular region, basically from the base of your neck to your lower back. That's that mid-back region that we're working on, loosening up. So check these out, share it with a friend, because I know these will be super helpful for the American population, Western civilization, or anyone else. Now, the modified Sphinx mobility drill is basically a spin-off of the traditional cat-cow, which almost everybody knows. The only difference is we are going to be positioning ourselves in a certain way to lock out other areas so that the movement that you're generating is more tailored or specific to an area. And in this case, we're talking about the mid-back. Now, the mid-back is obviously one of the major areas that gets tight because of what we do on a consistent basis, whether that's inactivity and being stuck seated positions, whether in our car, on our couch, or at work. But even standing too much can also be problematic, because when you're standing, usually most of us don't have the correct ergonomic setup where we're still falling forward. And essentially our back is just in a hyper flexed position or a relatively flexed position, and it doesn't move out of there a lot. So we're trying to create more extension within that. So the classic cat-cow, as you know, is going to be on your hands and knees, quadruped, and you're going to draw yourself up towards the ceiling, and then you're going to drop belly and back towards the ground. So I'm creating, this is cow where I'm sagged, and then cat position, like you would see a cat arch, you're going to see it nice and rounded. Now, for a lot of people, we get mid-back movement here, but more times than not, in flexion, because we flex a lot there, we get a lot of flexion in our upper back and not a lot in our lower back. And then when we go down, we get a lot of extension in our lower back, but not a lot of extension in our mid-back. So what you're going to do is you're going to sit your butt back towards your heels. Now, your hands will be anywhere in between where they initially were or back towards closer to your knees. Now, what this position does is when I sit my butt towards my heels, this is what a lot of people refer to as a lumbar lock. So by putting my low back into a little bit of flexion, I'm locking it down so that now when I do this cat-cow position or extension and flexion, you're gonna specifically target much more of the mid-back. Okay, so you can even see that here. When I go into flexion and extension, I'm not getting a lot of movement out of my back, my lower back, and I even feel a lot more flexion and extension in my mid-back. Now, I like calling this like an undulation. It can be fine to just hold a position and try to stretch and push into it a little bit more, but I like thinking like a wave or a rope undulating. I want to try to maintain as much movement and fluidity as I can to loosen things up. So from here, what I like doing and suggesting is going to extension, flexion, where I'm moving kind of at that speed. And then you might find something tight you want to kind of lean into or shift, but that's essentially what we're talking about. Now, what's also great in this position, because I've locked the lumbar out, I can go in other directions, right? So if I'm here in extension, I can now tip my shoulders side to side to work on lateral flexion while in extension. I can go into forward flexion and then shift side to side, right? And then I can also do rotation. So if I'm in extension, I can rotate, right? If I'm in flexion, I can also rotate. Now, the reason why this is so important, oftentimes we look at range of motion in these specific planes of motion, but we never combine them. So for instance, we do flexion extension by itself, then we do lateral flexion by itself, and then we do rotation by itself. But all of these joints have coupled motion patterns that need to work together. So we need to be able to go into lateral flexion and rotation, or forward flexion and rotation, or extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. So we're able to carve out and find all of the little sticky points within the joints that oftentimes get overlooked and missed simply because we're trying to stay in one plane of motion consistently rather than tying them all together. And the modified Sphinx is great because it locks out the lower back so that we can target all of that energy and focus into the mid back. So the thread the needle, as most of us know, it's usually done as a quadruped position where you basically are taking one hand behind your neck, you bring elbow down and through, and then you bring it up towards the ceiling. But as we have indicated with other movements, such as the modified Sphinx, when we're in a quadruped position, we get a lot of extra rotation or movement, not only from the lower back, but also from the hips, because I can shift hips and move everything with it. So we're not isolating the mid back as much as what we're trying to indicate and trying to do. So I'm going to show you first from a side view. So I like doing this in that modified Sphinx position where I'm trying to just sit my butt back a little bit more to lock out the hips and the lower back so I can't get as much shifting or extra movement outside of the hips and the lower back. So from here, I'll take a hand behind the neck, I'll dive it down through the other arm, and then I'll lift it up towards the ceiling. Now, what I like to try to show from here, or a cue, is that bottom hand on the ground, push that hand and your elbow away from each other. You're gonna get 5 to 10 degrees more rotation by just simply being more active in your twisting. Then we come back down, back up. And again, as I kind of indicated with some of our other movements, I like creating a flow of undulations rather than just static holding and trying to force it. If each time you can get a centimeter, 2, or a half an inch more, you're gonna be improving that mobility. So from a top-down view, so you can kind of see it, if I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna do it the other way here. I'm gonna sit back a little bit, hand behind the neck, elbow down and through, elbow back up. So you can see I kind of stopped here, but if I push my hand and elbow away from each other, I get a little bit more rotation there. Down and through, and back up. Now, this thread the needle can also be done in a standing position where it's in a wide leg position where I'm kind of up and through, but here you're gonna see a lot more rotation from the rest. So if we're wanting to isolate rotation for the lower back, or sorry, for the thoracic spine, I find that doing that lumbar lock or that modified Sphinx position helps hold you so you can really isolate rotation. Now, again, you're gonna see variations in how much you can rotate, whether your back's in flexion or extension, so you simply play with that. Do I want to be in more flexion and rotate? Do I want to be in more extension and rotate? Neither one is better or worse. We're just trying to improve all the ranges of motions around all of those so that we get the most out of our mid-back or thoracic spine. Today what we're going to be going over is a half kneeling thoracic rotation exercise. This is really good because when we're talking about mobility, it's really important to be able to isolate the area that you're trying to make move more, as opposed to having all the energy leak out into other areas. So when we're doing this half kneeling up against the wall, this helps us lock in the pelvis and the lower back a little bit more. So we're getting all of that rotation through the thoracic spine, which we're focusing on. So this is the half kneeling rotation. I'm using a pad here. Pad is not necessary just because this hardwood floor is fairly hard on the knees. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna have the knee that's closest to the wall up, and then the knee that's furthest away from the wall down. So in doing this, I'm trying to pin this knee that's up against the wall, holding that. And then because of this half kneeling or split stance position, it helps kind of torque and lock my pelvis into place. Now there's 2 different ways we're gonna basically swim our arms to increase thoracic rotation specifically. So if I start with my hands together here, I'm simply just gonna kind of open book to where I'm trying to get my hand away and touching the wall behind me. Now, I'm not gonna force it so that I compensate from other areas just to touch the wall. I'm just gonna keep repeating that motion so that I can soften that direction and improve that mobility and range of motion, okay? Now, one cue that's helpful for you to think about is when you're here, I want you to try to lengthen your wingspan. And in doing so, you're actually gonna twist your mid back a little bit more to improve that range of motion. So rather than thinking like pull your shoulder blades together, I actually want you to spread your fingertips and your wingspan apart. Now that's one direction that we're gonna do. The other direction is to then turn into the wall. So again, with my hips stabilized and everything kind of stacked, it's gonna help me isolate that rotation in my mid back. So again, I'm gonna start palm to palm, but at this time, I'm gonna take the arm that's closest to the wall, do a nice big arc around the wall, and then I'm actually gonna be facing the wall. And then I'm gonna come back. Now what's nice about this one is because I'm facing the wall, I can kind of push into it to help me turn a little bit more. As opposed to me turning away from the wall, I have nothing to leverage to help me twist and move. So a couple more motions here. Right, so this is your half kneeling thoracic wall rotation. Beautiful exercise for improving the thoracic rotation in your mid back and overall improving the mobility of our thoracic spine or mid back.